Hello and welcome back to another episode from the Dutch Investors. It's good to have you back. Welcome to episode 1 of Things That Never Change. I've been reading Morgan Housel's book Same as Ever for a second time now, and it is so good and filled with golden nuggets, it demanded a little series of its own. While the world obsesses over things that change, we are going to focus on things that never change, because those are the things we can rely on. Let's not waste any more time and get into the episode. Let me start off with the first story, Hanging On by a Thread. Think about how often the course of humanity, the fate of nations, the survival of entire businesses has come down to a single, random, unforeseeable encounter. A thoughtless decision. A moment of pure accident that led to magic for some and mayhem for many others. History is filled with these almost unbelievable junctures. Think of Coca-Cola, a global giant whose formula only came into existence because of a fountain worker in 1886, who made an unforeseeable dispensing error of mixing the intended headache syrup with carbonated water. Meanwhile, Amazon's fate hung on a single tense moment. In 1997, when Jeff Bezos deliberately delayed sending a crucial fax, causing a deal to be cancelled, and thus preserving the company's independence. And finally, the entire foundation of modern Berkshire Hathaway owes its existence to a chance phone call from Warren Buffett made to a friend in 1969, leading him to buy the small local business called See's Candies and change his investment philosophy forever. We look back at the past and it looks inevitable. We know the Allied forces won World War II. It seems obvious in hindsight. Looking back at the mortgage pyramid scheme from 2008, we now know what happened. In the book, Housel gives another beautiful example. Go back to the American Civil War, September 1862. The Confederate Army under Robert E. Lee is marching north. They're winning. Britain and France are on the verge of officially recognizing the Confederacy as a nation. If that happens, the United States, as we know it, is likely gone. But then, a Union corporal named Barton Mitchell is resting in a field in Maryland, and he spots a package on the ground. It's 3 cigars wrapped in a piece of paper. But that paper wasn't trash. It was a copy of Special Order 191, General Lee's detailed battle plans outlining exactly where his army was moving and how it was divided. Because of those 3 dropped cigars, the Union Army intercepted the plans, forced the Battle of Antietam, and stopped the Confederate advance. Think about that for a second. The fate of an entire nation, the United States of America, hung on a soldier being careless with his cigars. So much of the world's most consequential changes come from randomness and chance. Your job as a long-term investor is not to perfectly predict that complexity. It is simply to build a portfolio of companies or ETFs that is resilient enough to survive whichever way that thread happens to snap. History hangs by a thread. If you think you can model the future with precision, remember the cigars. I love that story. That brings me to story 2 about risk is what you don't see. It is well known people suck at predicting the future. Or while we can somewhat estimate and guess what will happen, but the things that we don't see coming are the things that change everything. Risk is what you have left over after you thought of everything. Let me tell you 2 short stories from the book that explain this law. Before launching themselves into space on rockets, NASA astronauts ran tests in high-altitude hot air balloons. A balloon flight on May 4, 1961 took American Victor Prather and another pilot to 113,000 feet, scraping the edge of space. The goal was to test NASA's spacesuit. The flight was a massive success, and the suit worked beautifully. As Prather descended back to Earth, he opened his faceplate on his helmet when he was low enough to breathe on his own. He landed in the ocean as planned, where a helicopter was to pull him into safety. But there was a small mishap. While connecting himself to the helicopter's rescue line, Prather slipped, falling into the ocean. This shouldn't have been that big of a deal, and no one in the rescue helicopter panicked. The spacesuit should have been watertight, but since Prather had opened his faceplate, he was now exposed to the elements. Water rushed into his suit. Prather drowned. Think of how much planning goes into launching someone into space. So much expertise, so many contingencies, so many what-ifs and what-thens. Every detail is contemplated by thousands of experts. NASA is probably the most planning-centric organization that ever existed. You don't go to the moon by crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. Every conceivable risk has a plan B, and a plan C, if not more. But even then, despite so much planning, a tiny thing, such as opening your faceplate, invites catastrophe. The other story I want to tell you about is about Harry Houdini, the world's greatest escape artist. He made a living surviving the impossible, such as being buried alive or being handcuffed underwater. He was a master of risk management for the things he could see. But in 1926, he was sitting in his dressing room, and a student walked in and asked if it was true Houdini could withstand a punch to the stomach. Houdini, who was recovering from a broken ankle and wasn't expecting it, nodded. The student hit him straight to the chest before Houdini could prepare. The student caught Houdini off guard. The next day, Houdini woke up with a lot of pain. His appendix was ruptured and Harry Houdini died. He didn't die from the stunts. He died from a ruptured appendix caused by an unexpected punch in a dressing room. I mean, really? This is the definition of risks. It's the thing you don't see coming. It's the event that isn't in your DCF or spreadsheet. It's 9/11 closing the stock market, or a global pandemic shutting down the economy. You cannot prepare for these specific events because you don't know what they are. And the only defense is a massive margin of safety. Saving money for no specific reason. Just to survive the punch to the appendix. Just to survive the punch you didn't see coming. Weird, right? Risk is such a weird and strange topic, and we have so much more to learn about that. Let me take you to the third story. Now You See Me. No, I'm not talking about the movie, although it's a pretty good movie. Nothing is more persuasive than what you've experienced firsthand. There is a massive gap between understanding something intellectually and understanding and feeling it emotionally. In school, you might learn that the Great Depression was a time when there was a lot of uncertainty and stock prices fell. You might memorize the dates and you passed the test, but you haven't lived it, so you don't really know it. Housel points out that you cannot simulate fear. When you're stressed or terrified, your body floods with cortisol. Your brain literally functions differently when you are calm. This is why people sell at the bottom of a market crash. It's not because they're stupid. It's because the pain of losing money is an emotional experience. It's not a math problem. Varlam Shamalov, a poet who spent 15 years in prison in a gulag, once wrote how quickly normal people can crack under stress and uncertainty. Take a good, honest, loving person and strip them of basic necessities, and you'll soon get an unrecognizable monster who'll do anything to survive. He said, under high stress, a man becomes a beast in 3 weeks. The big takeaway is that we really have no ideas what policies we'll be pushing for in, say, 5 or 10 years. Unexpected hardship makes people do and think things that never imagine when things are calm. Your personal views fall into the same trap. In investing, saying, I will be greedy when others are fearful, is easier said than done, because people underestimate how much their views and goals change when the markets break. The reason you may embrace ideas and goals you once thought unthinkable, because there are more changes during downturns than just asset prices declining. It's very hard to imagine the full context until you experience it firsthand. It's a lesson about humility. Don't look at someone acting irrationally during a crisis and judge them. You have no idea how you will behave until that moment arrives. And when you build your financial plan, assume that the future you will be scared and less rational than the present you. So build guardrails that prevent you from making permanent mistakes when you are in that emotional state. You might think you know how to feel, then you experience it firsthand and you realize, okay, it's more complicated than I thought. Fascinating, is it not? Time for the 4th story. Wounds heal, scars last. We like to think we analyze the world objectively, but we really don't. We analyze it through the lens of our own trauma. Housel uses the example of the generation that grew up during the Great Depression. Even 40 years later, in the booming 1960s, that generation saved money at rates that made no sense to economists. They refused to take risks. They avoided the stock market. Wounds heal, but scars last. Your view of risk is anchored by what happened to you in your formative years. If you came of age during high inflation, you will always fear inflation. If you were bitten by a large dog when you were young, you'll always have that same fear. If you started investing during the tech boom, you will be more comfortable with higher valuations. Is any of that bad? Not necessarily, but it's not good in any way either. What have you experienced that I haven't, that makes you believe what you do? And would I think about the world like you do if I experienced what you have? That's a good question, right? Investing is largely about psychology and human behavior. People who've had different experiences from you will think differently than you do, period. Most debates are not about disagreements, but people with different experiences talking over each other. We absolutely hate it if we can't measure something. We want that fake sense of security. We can see and measure just about everything, except people's moods, fears, hopes, grudges, goals, triggers, and expectations. And this is critical for you, for me, as investors. When you disagree with someone, no matter the topic or data available to you, ask yourself, what scars do they have that I don't? And equally important, what scars do I have that are potentially blinding me? Beautiful. It's time for the 5th and final story of this episode, Wild Minds. I think you'll like this one. We have this fantasy about smart people, geniuses. We want the visionary CEO who builds electric cars and rockets, but we also want them to be stable, predictable, polite board members. Housel says, forget about it. It doesn't work that way. He looks at people like John von Neumann, the father of modern computing, or Steve Jobs, or Elon Musk. These people have wild minds. They think differently than 99% of the population. But you cannot unbundle the genius from madness. The same brain wiring that allows them to take these risks necessary to change the world is the same wiring that makes them erratic, difficult, and obsessive. Of course they have abnormal characteristics. It's the reason they're successful. There is no world in which we should assume that all those abnormal characteristics are positive, polite, endearing, or appealing. People who are abnormally good at one thing tend to be abnormally bad at something else. It's as if the brain has a capacity for only so much knowledge and emotion, and an abnormal skill robs bandwidth from the other parts from someone's personality. Take Elon Musk. I think it's the most clear example. Elon Musk is 54 years now, but when he started, what kind of 32-year-old thinks he can take on General Motors, Ford, and NASA at the same time? I mean, you have to be an utter maniac. The kind of person who thinks normal constraints don't apply to them. People love the visionary genius side of Musk, but they want it to come without the side that operates in his distorted I don't care about your customs version of reality. But Housel, and we have to agree with Housel, don't think those two things can really be separated. They're the risk-reward trade-offs of the same personality trait. The same goes for Steve Jobs, who was both a genius, but he could be a monster of a boss. Same goes for Walt Disney, whose ambitions pushed every company he touched to the razor's edge of bankruptcy. Former US National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy once told President John F. Kennedy that trying to go to the moon was a stupid, crazy goal. Kennedy responded, "You don't run for president in your 40s unless you have a certain moxie." If you invest in a company led by a wild mind, for example Elon Musk, you have to accept the whole package. It's the cost of doing business with the outliers. That's it for part 1. 5 stories of things that never change. We have quite a few more to go, and I'm excited. So we'll see you in the next one. As always, stay curious, keep learning, and happy investing.